This vegan woman gave a speech at Oxford University this week about veganism. I think it's the only thing vegans are allowed to talk about, and it's absolutely insane. It's a straight run through all the meaningless woke lefty buzzwords, the sexual politics of meat, wounded masculinity, white supremacist, colonialism, gender binary, sexy chickens, and bizarrely 9/11 gets in there as well. It's a total word salad, which seems appropriate given she's a vegan. I mean, I get that eating meat causes suffering, but vegan food doesn't end suffering. It just moves the suffering one step up the food chain from the animal to me. I'm not anti-vegan. I actually tried a vegan diet when I needed to lose weight, and I lost 7 kilos. All of it from my personality. Anyway, let's watch the clip.
What we choose to eat has consequences far beyond the circumference of our plates.
Yeah, it can also have effects inside the circumference of the toilet bowl.
Specifically, your vote tonight expresses your allegiance to or rejection of a white supremacist patriarchal worldview.
Whoa, this went sideways pretty quickly. Eating meat is white supremacist and patriarchal? Is she aware that women and non-white people eat meat? I mean, has she ever been to a barbecue at a black person's house?
Do we vote to further inequality and sustain world-destroying violence? In the sexual politics of meat, I introduced the concept of animals as absent reference.
The sexual politics of meat. I actually heard about this when I was at school. My mate Todger filled a jam jar with chopped liver and stuck his wang in it like some sort of homemade fleshlight.
In order to be eaten, animals must disappear as living beings, that is, be killed.
Yes, animals generally have to be killed to be eaten. I mean, eating a live cow can be very tough on the digestive system.
They then disappear conceptually, as so many forms in which we eat animals' corpses are massaged by euphemistic language. Hamburger, steak, pork, bacon, etc. Even the speaker just before me talked about turkeys. He's talking about dead, butchered turkeys of whom part of their bodies will be eaten.
Yeah, and they're still called turkeys. They specifically haven't been semantically massaged to disappear conceptually.
Meat eaters order leg of lamb, not a baby lamb's leg. The animals cannot possess their own body parts.
Yeah, again, it's a leg of lamb. It's literally stating the limb and the animal that it's from. The animal hasn't been conceptually disappeared at all. I mean, if she'd said sausages, which have been conceptually massaged to remove the connection with beef, then you'd have a point, especially if they're Sainsbury's basic sausages, which have meat content so low it's basically homeopathic.
21st century animal eating requires our complicity in a new colonialism. We know how settler colonialism worked. And a race and replace system that forced indigenous people off the land, replacing them with cattle and white settlers. I recognize today as Indigenous Peoples Day. One of the defining aspects of the colonial legacy is an ongoing white supremacist belief system and an ownership paradigm.
I love how she's saying all of this in front of people with all these different ethnicities. Man, it must make lefties absolutely furious to see all these different ethnicities thriving at one of the world's most esteemed universities and not like suffering and being victims that need the lefties' help. There's Kelvin walking across. We do a show together most Saturdays on GB News with Nana Akoya, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. if you want to watch it.
Entitlement and ownership are linked. All the justifications for the taking of land by white colonial authorities included the claim, well, the Indians can't prove they own the land.
So how does this relate to the UK, where white people didn't displace indigenous people because the white people are the indigenous people and land ownership was fought for against the feudal lords because property ownership protects the little guy, the individual, from having the fruits of their labour taken? Quinoa is actually a staple food in Peru or something like that, but its popularity as a vegan food in the UK has pushed prices up, which means that native Peruvians or wherever it's from can no longer afford it. How is that helping indigenous communities?
Hunting exists within this colonial ownership paradigm.
No, it doesn't. Indigenous tribes do way more hunting than colonialist Westerners because we've invented farming, so we can just sit around and then whack the cow on the head with a hammer when we want to eat it.
It presumes that animals don't have title to their own lives.
Yeah, they don't. They're animals. How's a gazelle going to sign property deeds?
Once dispossessed of their lives, the hunted animal can become your property.
On that point.
In a minute. Approximately 90% of Native Americans were killed off by erase and replace settler colonialism. It's the new colonialism that boasts, I'll hunt for myself and be grateful like the Native Americans. As well, like the Native Americans, I thank the animal for their sacrifice. And I wonder, how do you know the animal would have picked you to feed off their corpse?
If humankind could only eat animals that fell out of trees, died of old age, or volunteered to be eaten, that had the sentience and the impulse to sign a consent waiver, then we'd have died out a long time ago.
The argument that hunting is ethical presumes that some primeval form of eating exists, unmediated by corrupting influences of society. There's no room in the new colonialism for an indigenous worldview to exist. Instead, it collapses more than 100 Native American nations into one amalgam and attributes a static indigenous worldview that erases those nations that were predominantly vegetarian and lived in urban areas.
Urban areas? Indigenous people lived in urban areas? What about the Inuit people of North America who eat almost exclusively whales and seals and narwhals and fish and stuff like that, and no vegetables at all because quinoa doesn't grow very well on icebergs? I mean, I can't help but notice that she shits all over Western civilization, but she's enjoying all the trappings of it. She's speaking in a British university, using Western technology to broadcast a huge audience. She undoubtedly flew here instead of getting on a balsa wood raft and navigating by the stars. And when she gets too old, she'll retire to sheltered housing instead of being left on her own to perish and be picked apart by vultures, as happens in many indigenous cultures.
70% of the population would have to be eliminated for people to try to rely on hunting to survive.
Yeah, which is why thousands of years ago we transitioned from hunter-gatherer to farmer, allowing us to provision and store food and feed many more people, because unlike this woman, we weren't complete maniacs.
As for domesticated animals, Percy Shelley pointed out just after being expelled from Oxford, the quantity of nutritious vegetable matter consumed in fattening the carcass of an ox would afford 10 times the sustenance if gathered immediately from the bosom of the earth.
Yeah, and it would taste like shit. Shelley was one of the first celebrity vegetarians, even predated Morrissey and Hitler, and his diet caused him to suffer from health issues like nephritis and tuberculosis. He even suffered from depression because his brain didn't have enough meat protein in it to synthesize happiness. He died aged 29 in a boating accident because he didn't have enough strength to hold an oar.
200 years after Shelley, as we've heard, 1/3 of the landmass of the world is committed to animal agriculture. Entire ecosystems are disappearing. 80% of deforested acres in the Amazon were cleared for animal-based cattle grazing.
Hunters in the West pay to preserve huge tracts of ecologically diverse wild habitat to give the animals they hunt somewhere to live. This is incredibly good for the environment. If you look at grouse moors as an example, they provide habitat for all kinds of rare flora and fauna, such as ptarmigan or orchids, and if it wasn't for people shooting the grouse, they wouldn't exist. They'd be used for the next most lucrative use for the land, which in most cases is blanket coniferous forestry, which creates a monoculture of non-indigenous coniferous trees that acidify the soil and water courses downstream. I mean, let's hear it for hunters who contribute so much to preserving the environment and show respect to the animals they eat and maintain traditions that will probably need in a few years when Western civilization is ended by the next Chinese bioweapon. We've all got to return to living hand to mouth in the woods.
If you eat animals, you take up more climate space, requiring more water, more land, more forest deforestation, contributing more greenhouse gases.
Well, what about sheep farming? In my native Scotland, it's done on upland moors that can't be used for vegetable crops as it's too steep and the soil isn't right, so there's no deforestation and the animals live a healthy life outside.
This is felt disproportionately by countries in the global south. Their carbon footprint is smaller, but they experience more frequent and intense climate change-caused weather events. These events especially affect girls and young women. Your hamburger comes with a dose of misogyny.
So hamburgers are misogynist because they contribute to climate change, which affects women more. How? Are women more susceptible to rising sea levels because they're not as tall? I mean, I think climate change is actually going to be good for women because in my experience, women always want to turn up the heat in the office. The only way a hamburger has ever been misogynist is when it's been used as a euphemism for a fat girl's pum-pum.
The Western world colonized their space without sending a single beef eater. Through colonial power, the diet of beef-loving English people became normative. The food heritage of pre-conquest peoples, like the land itself, was overrun. It was the colonizers, especially the British, who declared that the virility of meat-eating nations explained their success over the supposed feminine and weak rice-eating countries they defeated.
Well, the evidence shows that the meat-eating Brits actually did dominate the whole world, so maybe they were right.
Historically, the vast majority of the world lived without animal protein as a central part of their diet. The assumption that the best protein comes from corpses is a racist belief, as it erases and replaces indigenous African, Asian, Mesoamerican cultural food practices.
What the actual deep-fried fuck? I'm pretty sure that native tribes eat meat. Every time I see a documentary about native tribes, they're running through the jungle with their dicks tied to their tummy with a bit of string, blowing darts at baboons so they can eat them later. And I can categorically guarantee that some guy eating a cottage pie in Yorkshire in 1695 was not doing it to erase and replace African, Asian, Mesoamerican food. He didn't know about African, Asian, Mesoamerican food because Wagamamas hadn't opened a branch in Rotherham in 1695. If any cuisine is getting erased, this woman wants to erase the culture of British indigenous cuisine. I don't know why. I can't stand people who say British food is bland, by the way. Oh, Worcester sauce is bland, is it? Stilton doesn't have any flavour. Marmite is tasteless. If you think that British food has no spice, I dare you, I defy you to eat a tablespoon of English mustard. I will visit you in hospital when your eyes are popping out like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Total Recall, and I will spoon horseradish in your nasal cavity and then watch you die. Man, I wonder how one of the indigenous tribes she keeps banging on about would welcome her into the tribe, trying to get their hunting trip cancelled because the blow darts are phallic, and putting the campfire out because it doesn't have Stonewall accreditation.
Meat eating is also one of the ways gender-based structures of oppression are perpetuated. Men in the West are taunted to renew their man card by eating meat because that's what real men do.
Yeah, it is what real men do. Finally, something I can agree with.
That's the sexual politics of meat, and it reveals how unsettled masculinity really is. Back home, my library card is good for 7 years, but a man card can expire between breakfast and lunch if someone eats a veggie burger. Masculinity, a construct of the gender binary facing constant destabilization, feels always under threat, and eating animals is its protection racket.
Question?
That's why after 9/11, nope.
9/11, where the fuck is this going?
That's why after 9/11, a focus on men as heroes and on meat eating became part of the reclamation of a wounded masculinity.
Oh yeah, those evil men risking their lives to save other people's lives on 9/11. Look, we all see the men on 9/11 as heroes. The police and firemen are heroes to you if you're like most people, or the pilots are heroes to you if you're a Guardian reader.
When a black man was elected as US president,
Obama was actually mixed race, his mother is white, and on behalf of white people, we're very proud that one of us was president.
we saw how white this wounded masculinity was. White supremacists weaponized it, eating meat, eggs, and dairy. Images of milk-drinking white men, of platters groaning with meat, and the baiting of liberal men as so-called soy boys are all part of the neo-Nazi messaging.
Neo-Nazi, white supremacist. Has this woman ever met any black people? They eat meat. If anything, veganism is an overwhelmingly white trend, and soy contains isoflavones. This is a type of plant estrogen which can cause estrogenic effects in humans, such as crying at adverts, sitting down to pee, acting like astrology is serious, and taking 10 minutes to find your keys in your massive handbag.
This is their right, the neo-Nazis say. This is their identity. The new colonization rests on the unstable foundation of white men's insecurities. Look at the way people, men, in the animal industry speak of female animals as willing and ready to be made forcibly pregnant, which female animals are powerless to resist. There'd be no meat eating without the constant forced reproduction by female animals.
Oh yeah, keep talking, baby, I'm almost there. Oh, where's the cham cham with the chopped liver?
Yet popular culture is flooded with references to sexy cows, sexy pigs, sexy chickens, Sexy fishes who all just want to have fun.
Sexy chickens. I've literally never seen a sexy cow, sexy pig, sexy fish, or sexy chicken in popular culture. Does she mean Jessica Rabbit? Jessica Rabbit was a rabbit.
They want to be pregnant and they want to be killed because this feminized sexuality wants to be eaten.
What's the link between feminized sexuality and wanting to be eaten? Oh, yeah.
The only desire animals are credited with possessing is the desire to be consumed.
There are loads of desires credited to animals, as horny as a bull buffalo in springtime, hungry like the wolf, puppy love. I've never once heard of an animal being accredited with the desire to be eaten. Oh, as selflessly open to being char-grilled as a capybara.
Some meat eaters are afraid of what they will feel if they look too closely at the degradations that constitute animals' experience. Mention disabling practices or the devastating separation of cows and their babies, and we hear meat eaters exclaim, "Don't tell me." Why are they afraid of the feelings such knowledge produces? They accept a patriarchal construct that views feelings as unruly and untrustworthy, causing chaos.
This is patriarchal, so anything that involves feelings, according to this woman, no matter what those feelings are, disgust, civility, nausea, are female, and the only reason they're rejected is because the patriarchy can't deal with feelings?
To say you care about animals is considered a sign of weakness in a world still committed to the gender binary that values stereotyped masculine reason over stereotyped feminine feeling.
Now she's saying that reason is masculine and feelings are feminine? I mean, as a misogynist, I applaud this weak-minded woman's admission that only men can be logical.
And yet the reasons we hear are so irrational. If I did not eat animals, they never would be born. Meat eaters, like anti-abortionists, have forgotten that one quality of non-existence is not having awareness about existence.
Wait, what? She's comparing meat eating to being anti-abortion. She hates meat eating because it means that a helpless animal gets killed, but is pro a helpless baby being killed? I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm totally in favour of access to abortion because from a purely pragmatic point of view, some women are going to get them, so they should be able to get safe ones. But I'm kind of against it as a concept because it involves killing a viable person. But to be anti-chicken killing and pro-baby killing is such a cognitive dissonance, it can only be a left-wing policy.
The new colonialist boasts, "I only eat meat from locally owned farms, and I know the farmers there love their animals." If killing what one loves is standard practice, I hope they don't start loving me. What about carrots? What about carrots, we're asked, though I've never seen a meat eater leap into the road to save a carrot from being run over by an automobile.
Yeah, because they're not mental. They wouldn't leap into the road to save a carrot because not only is it not sentient, it doesn't even have a central nervous system. It's a carrot.
When all else fails, meat eaters assert that animals are not our equals. One would think such an equality would require us to respond more, not less sympathetically. Meat eaters tell me it's so hard to change, and yet I watch them work even harder not to change. If you all agree that 95% of meat is from factory farmed animals and it's wrong, stop eating it. Go to your colleges and eat the vegan option, which every college at this campus offers. It's very simple. If you agree with the basic things so that we're not even debating factory farms, then act on it. So, is our global outcome to be determined by people afraid to change who are going to hold on to some old conceived notion of power? Change may be hard, but not changing is harder. Tonight, you're being asked to vote on whether you accept this new colonialism or not. Our menu choices don't stay on the plate. And I heard all your laughter. I know some of these must be new ideas, or you think they're fringe or whatever. Our whiteness is part of the problem of meat eating.
Evolutionary biologists reckon that meat eating gave humans the extra fuel to develop larger brains and thus become more intelligent, which was needed to coordinate in groups to hunt more effectively. After listening to this woman, I put forward the theory that eating no meat can actually reverse this increase in intelligence. This all shows that lefty buzzwords like white supremacist, patriarchal, racist, and colonialist have all been completely decoupled from their original meaning and are now just used to say This is a bad thing and I want it to be banned. Which is my whole issue with leftists. I've got no problem with them eating soy or quinoa or whatever they want, but don't try and make me do it. If it was any good, you wouldn't need to convince people. People are always trying to make vegan food look and taste like meat. The Impossible Burger, Linda McCartney sausages, tofurkey. Nobody's trying to get a T-bone steak and make it taste like cabbage. Vegan food isn't real food. It's the food we put onto our plates next to the real food and scrape into the bin after we've eaten the real food. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share and subscribe and all that sort of stuff. And also, if you like these videos, consider supporting me so I can buy non-vegan sausages by becoming a Patreon. So for as little as, I think it's £3 a month, which is the price of a third of a pint of beer in central London, you can become a Patreon and support me and also get access to Patreon-only content, like a Patreon-only podcast. You get early access to stuff. And you can get listed as a stuntman or my security in the description. So yeah, thanks for listening. I'll be Leo Kearse. Goodbye. Bye.